Story: The Negative Hour. At 2:17 every morning, everyone in Sector 8 died for exactly 60 seconds. No one noticed at first. People noticed their phone batteries dropping from 80% to 13%. They noticed milk turning sour in sealed packets. They noticed clocks skipping from 2:16 to 2:18 as if time had swallowed a number and refused to burp it back. But no one noticed the death. Not until Ion's grandmother woke up screaming from her afternoon nap and told him she had seen him lying on the floor beside his bed with his eyes open. Ion laughed because she was 82, dramatic, and always suspicious of technology. She said the new cell tower behind their building was poisoning their dreams. She said the city had become too bright at night and darkness had started hiding inside people instead of outside them. Then she described his room. The cracked blue charger near his pillow. The half-eaten packet of chips under his study table. The way his left hand had been curled against his chest. Ion stopped laughing. His grandmother had not entered his room in 3 weeks. Her knees hurt too much to climb the stairs. "What time?" he asked. She looked at him with eyes that had seen enough of life to know when life was pretending. 2:17, she said. Same time the dogs stopped barking. That night, Ion stayed awake. Sector 8 was a new township on the edge of Nagpur, built too quickly on land that used to be a stone quarry. 12 identical towers. 1 shopping complex. 1 half-finished hospital. 1 artificial lake with blue lights under the water. The brochures called it a smart habitat. The residents called it Sector 8 because the builder's name was longer than anyone wanted to say. At 2 o'clock, the township was normal. Ceiling fan. Distant traffic. Elevator hum. A pressure cooker whistle from some night shift worker's kitchen. A dog barking near the gate. At 2:16, Ion held his phone camera toward himself. At 2:17, the phone shut off. The fan stopped. The building stopped. Not power cut stopped. Not silence. Stopped. Ion felt the air leave the room. Not from his lungs. From the room itself. The walls seemed to pull inward without moving. The darkness became flat and thick. His ears filled with a pressure like he had dived too deep into water. Then he saw himself on the bed. He was sitting upright near the window. But he was also lying on the bed. The body on the bed had his face, his clothes, his threadbare black t-shirt, his old scar under the chin. It lay perfectly still, eyes half open, mouth relaxed. Dead, his mind said, with a calmness that terrified him more than panic would have. Ion tried to scream. No sound came. Across the room, beside the dead version of him, something stood. It was not a ghost. Ghosts, if they existed, had shape. This thing was a gap where shape should be. A tall absence bending over his dead body, studying him with an attention so intimate it felt like touch. Its head had no face, only a darkness deeper than the rest of the room. It placed one long hand above Ion's dead mouth. A thin white thread rose from between the dead lips. The thing pulled gently. The thread came out like breath made visible. At 2:18, the fan started. The phone turned on. Ion fell from the window ledge, gasping so hard his throat hurt. On the bed, there was no dead body. But his pillow was wet. Not with sweat. With cold water. The next day, he checked the phone recording. The video had corrupted at 2:17. Not gone. Corrupted. 1 frame remained. In it, Ion could see his room from the angle of his own phone. He could see himself sitting by the window. He could see himself lying dead on the bed. And behind him, across every reflective surface in the room, the dark phone screen, the window glass, the steel water bottle, the tiny mirror on his cupboard, the tall black figure appeared multiple times, each reflection looking in a different direction. Only one reflection looked into the camera. Ion went to the police. The constable listened for 90 seconds and then asked what substance he had taken. Ion went to the township office. The manager blamed voltage fluctuation. He went to the maintenance supervisor, who surprised him by locking the cabin door. The supervisor's name was Ponde. He was a tired man with tobacco stains on his fingers and the eyes of someone who had not slept properly for months. "You saw it?" Ponde asked. Ion nodded. Ponde opened a drawer and took out a notebook. Every page was filled with times. 2:17. 2:17. 2:17. Under the times were apartment numbers. A903. C1202. B411. D707. Beside some numbers, Ponde had drawn small circles. Beside others, a black line. "What is this?" Ion asked. "Attendance," Ponde said. The word made Ion's skin tighten. Ponde explained in a whisper. 3 months ago, the builder had installed a new energy-saving system. Smart grid. Automated consumption balancing. Night cycle optimization. Beautiful words that meant the township's electricity was being controlled by an algorithm no one on site understood. The first week, lights flickered at 2:17. The second week, pets refused to sleep indoors. The third week, old people began dreaming of family members lying dead in their rooms. The fourth week, a child in Tower C told his mother that the tall uncle comes when we are not alive. Then people started changing. Not visibly. That was the worst part. A grocery shop owner forgot his daughter's nickname. A woman stopped recognizing the smell of her own cooking. A security guard who had worked 12 years on night duty became afraid of the dark between 2 lampposts. Small things disappeared from people. Preferences. Habits. Songs. Private jokes. The tiny useless pieces that made a person more than an ID proof. Ponde believed something was harvesting them during the missing minute. "Why?" Ion asked. Ponde looked toward the window. Behind the township office, the new cell tower rose over Sector 8, its red light blinking like a patient eye. "This place was built over a quarry," he said. "Before that, they say there was a stepwell. Before that, a shrine. Before that, who knows? But the old maps had a warning written over this land." "What warning?" Ponde turned a page. There, copied in his rough handwriting, were 3 words. "Do not count." Ion stared. Ponde said, "Some things stay outside the world because no one measures them. Then we put sensors here. Cameras. Grids. Attendance systems. Water meters. Biometric gates. We counted every unit, every face, every movement, every heartbeat. Maybe we counted something that was only safe as long as it stayed uncounted." That night, Ion decided to leave Sector 8. At 11:40, he packed his bag. At midnight, he booked a cab. At 12:30, the booking was cancelled. At 1 o'clock, the app showed no drivers. At 1:30, the main gate locked for security maintenance. At 2:10, his grandmother came into his room. She had climbed the stairs without her stick. Ion stared at her. "Nani?" She did not answer. Her eyes were open, but she looked as if she were listening to someone beneath the floor. "You should not have asked," she said. Her voice was hers and not hers. Something spoke through the gaps between her words. At 2:16, every light in Sector 8 went out. Ion grabbed his grandmother's hand. Her skin was cold. At 2:17, the world died. This time, Ion did not find himself outside his body. He woke inside the minute. The room was gone. Sector 8 stood around him in darkness, but not as buildings. The towers were transparent like glass models. Inside every apartment, every resident lay dead for that single minute. Hundreds of bodies in hundreds of rooms, perfectly still. Above them moved the tall black things. Not one. Many. They bent over sleeping bodies and pulled pale threads from mouths, ears, eyes, fingertips. The threads rose into the air and joined a web above the township. The web pulsed softly, like a second sky made of stolen selves. Ion saw a boy's laugh being pulled from him, shaped like a small silver bell. He saw a woman's memory of her mother's hands rising like warm smoke. He saw an old man's courage taken in a red thread that fought before it snapped. Nothing was bloody. Nothing was violent. That made it worse. It was clean theft. Efficient theft. The kind the world rarely punishes. Ion looked at his grandmother. In this dead minute, she was young. Not young in body. Young in presence. Her back was straight. Her eyes were sharp. Around her mouth, black threads had wrapped like roots, but she was holding them back with both hands. I have been awake in the negative hour for 21 nights, she said. Why didn't you tell me? I did. You forgot. A tall figure turned toward them. Then another. Then all of them. Across the transparent towers, hundreds of faceless heads lifted at once. His grandmother pushed a small object into his hand. It was a key. Old iron. Heavy. Impossible. The stepwell is still under the basement, she said. They built over the mouth, but they did not close the throat. Nani, come with me. She smiled. In the web above them, Ion saw a bright golden thread twisted around the black ones. His grandmother's memory of him as a child, sleeping on her lap. One of the figures pulled it. Her smile flickered. Run before you forget why, she said. At 2:18, Ion woke screaming in the stairwell. The key was in his hand. His grandmother was gone. Not dead. Gone. Her room was empty. Her clothes were gone. Her medicine gone. Her framed photographs showed Ion standing alone beside blank spaces. His mother did not remember having a mother. The neighbors did not remember the old woman who fed stray cats every morning. Only Ion remembered. And even that memory was already thinning. He ran to the basement. The key opened a maintenance door that had never opened before. Behind it was a staircase descending under the parking level. The air smelled of wet stone and old coins. At the bottom, beneath Sector 8, he found the stepwell. It should not have fit under the township. It was too large. Its carved steps descended into black water that reflected no ceiling. On each step were marks like tally lines, thousands and thousands of them, cut into stone. Counting marks. At the lowest visible step stood the township's central server rack, cables running from it into the water like roots. The smart grid. The algorithm. The new god of measurement, plugged into something ancient that should never have been counted. The screen on the server blinked awake. Ion expected code. Instead, it showed names. Every resident of Sector 8. Beside each name was a number. Ion found his own. Ion Joshi, 63%. He did not understand until he saw another name. Ponde Ramesh, 12%. Then another. Unknown elderly female resident, Tower B, 0%. His grandmother had not vanished. She had been completely harvested. A sound came from the water. Not a splash. A breath. The black water rose 1 inch. The server fans spun faster. Ion lifted a stone and smashed the screen. Nothing happened. The water rose another inch. From the surface emerged reflections of people who no longer existed. Not ghosts. Empty human outlines made from stolen traits, stolen memories, stolen habits. They opened their mouths in perfect silence. Ion looked at the cables. There were too many to pull. So he did the only thing he could think of. He stopped counting. He closed his eyes. He refused to read the names. He refused to measure how far the water had risen. He refused to calculate his chances. He thought of his grandmother without trying to remember her correctly. Not her age. Not her face. Not dates. Not details that could be counted and stolen. He thought of warmth. The smell of cardamom. A hand on his head during fever. A voice humming without words. The server screamed. Not through speakers. Through the building. Above him, every apartment light turned on. The water stopped rising. Ion opened his eyes. On the screen, the names had blurred. The percentages became meaningless symbols. The cables began to smoke. At 2:17, the negative hour opened one last time. The tall black figures stood all around the stepwell, crowded on the ancient stairs, their faceless heads tilted in confusion. They could count breath. They could count electricity. They could count steps, faces, hours, heartbeats, passwords, payments, deaths. They could not count love when it had no name. Ion stepped backward. The water swallowed the server. The web above Sector 8 tore. At 2:18, the township woke. People screamed in 12 towers at once. Not from fear. From memory returning. A mother remembered her child's nickname. A shopkeeper remembered an old song. A guard remembered he was brave before anyone paid him to be. Hundreds of tiny selves flew back into hundreds of lives. Ion found his grandmother in the courtyard. She was sitting beneath the dead decorative palm tree, confused and angry. "Why am I outside?" she demanded. Ion fell at her feet and wept. For 3 days, Sector 8 celebrated what it called a technical miracle. The builder blamed a server malfunction. The news channels called it mass hysteria. A spiritual influencer said the township had experienced a cleansing vibration and gained 2 million followers. Ion and Ponde sealed the basement door with cement. Then they painted over it. Then they stopped speaking of it. But some things do not end because they are defeated. Some things only wait to be measured again. 6 months later, the government announced a new smart city project. Full biometric integration. Predictive safety mapping. Real-time emotional analytics. Ion saw the advertisement on his phone while sitting beside his grandmother. The slogan was simple. A city that knows you completely. His phone battery dropped from 80% to 13. The room grew cold. From somewhere beneath the floor, something began softly counting. 1, 2, 3. Ion threw the phone into a bucket of water. For a moment, the screen went black. Then white letters appeared under the water. Not a notification. Not a message. A question. What percentage of you is still yours? At 2:16 that night, every dog in Sector 8 stopped barking. At 2:17, Ion's grandmother woke, took his hand, and whispered the only instruction that had ever saved them. Do not count. But outside their window, across the city, every smart meter blinked awake. Together, like eyes,